Chapter 16. Bloodline and Banners. It has been et or since I visited the ancestral lands of my clan, the Xialu Sint. I never expected to return to my ancestral fortress with a son, let alone for his sacred naming ceremony. Yet now that we are here, standing within the colossal stone walls of my youth, the moment I had dreamed of for months, in the cold quiet of space, had finally become a reality. Ruth has seemed increasingly nervous as of late. I could see the tension in the tight set of her shoulders and the way she hyperfixated on the security guards. I know she is deeply concerned about her safety and the safety of our child. The last time we entered a grand ceremonial hall together, the stones were painted with the blood of the elders during Erdine's brutal ambush. I could not lie to myself and pretend that I did not share her concerns. The threat of lingering coups was a shadow that refused to leave. That was precisely why I decided not to hold the ceremony at the Heligdom. Instead, I brought them here, home, behind the thickest, most heavily guarded battlements on Clison. The moment our transport touched down at my fortress, I immediately sent Ruth and the child to the inner chambers to rest, away from the prying eyes of my arriving commanders. The naming ceremony would take place tonight, at the precise hour when the moon hung highest in the ink-black sky. It was a profound relief to finally exist in a space where I did not have to constantly watch the shadows for my son's safety. Here, within these walls, I was not alone in my rejoice. The birth of an heir to our clan meant just as much to my people as it did for me. On Clison, the title of warlord of the Krigere brings immense military power, but it also carries a much more vital, desperate burden: water distribution from the High Council. Although we frequently trade with the Drasics for supplemental off-world resources, it is the strict water rations received from the High Council that keep the Xialu Sint clan alive. Without a legitimate heir to secure my seat and maintain our treaties, my people would slowly wither into the dust. My son was not just a child. He was the literal lifeline of our survival. As the hour approached, the grand hall of my ancestors was transformed into a breathtaking display of our clan's enduring might. The entire chamber was bathed in the warm, dancing glow of primitive firelight, casting long, dramatic shadows against the ancient stone walls. Between the architectural features of the room, heavy wall sconces held roaring torches, their light climbing toward the vaulted ceiling. Suspended from the center of the massive chamber hung a grand chandelier, a masterwork of dark iron holding dozens of thick, flickering candles that rained a softer, golden luminescence down upon the floor. At the far end of the hall was the dais, the high platform stage used to elevate my family above the assembly. A set of wide, imposing stone stairs led down from the platform, which was cut from the very bedrock of our fortress. Atop of the stage sat a heavy pulpit, flanked by high-backed chairs reserved for those who held the highest authority in our house. Stretching out from the base of the stone stairs was a vibrant, deep red tapestry. It cut a straight, regal path directly through the center of the room, guiding the eye all the way to the entrance of the hall. There, towering over the threshold, stood the colossal double doors, their dark fortified wood heavily detailed with intricate gleaming gold accents that caught the firelight with every shift of the flames. To the left and right, the architecture opened to the elements. 8 massive arched windows, 4 puncturing each side of the long hall, stared out into the ink-black night of Clison, letting the cool evening air slip into the heated room. Hanging proudly in the stone spaces between each of these grand archways were the banners of my house. The fabric was a deep, striking crimson, emblazoned with a sword and a dagger, crossed defiantly over one another. Underneath the blades, our ancient clan motto was woven in brilliant, shimmering gold print, reminding every warrior who entered exactly whose ground they stood upon. Everything was set. The atmosphere was thick with reverence, waiting only for the future of the Shalu Sint. I dressed in my father's armor to honor him tonight. Batar helped clasp my cloak, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw my father. Sadly, I am about the same age he was when he died in battle. Tonight will be a grand night. Everything that we fought for will be set in stone and would not have been a waste of life. My father's, my brother's. I walked slowly to Ruth's quarters. I am not sure how she feels about this evening. However, once the doors opened, I saw her holding our child. He was wrapped in a red cloth. I could see his ears slightly pointing out of the blanket. Ruth also wore a red gown. The maids must have helped her with her cloak. It was already properly attached. As the doors closed, she looked at me with brown eyes and smiled. I wonder what she is thinking. I wonder if she knows how important this night is for my people and how important she has become to me. I wish I had maintained my honor. If so, this would have been a more joyous moment. I would have been embraced by my mate and held my child without shame. As we walked towards the hall, I could hear trumpets playing. Trumpets should not be playing, for drums sound out in the halls of the Shalu Sints. Before I made it to the back entrance of the stage, one of the royal guards met us in the corridor. "Lord Van," he said anxiously, "the High Council is here for the naming ceremony. They are on the stage, waiting for your entrance." Batar and I looked at each other confused. The High Council never attends a naming ceremony. I did not want to worry Ruth, so I simply thanked the guard and proceeded inside the room. As soon as my people noticed the royal guards entering, they knew that we arrived, and they began chanting our house motto, "Era Ogmot, Era Omot, Era Omot," loud and proudful. The drums that signaled our entrances banged loudly as they continued to call out, "Era Ogmot, Era Omot, Era Omot." As we walked onto the stage, the High Council greeted each of us by raising their right hand. I followed by returning the same gesture as I assisted Ruth to sit upon her throne. The ceremony continued long into the night, filled with performances from my people. Elder storytellers stepped forward to recite the sweeping epics of our ancestors, their rhythmic spoken words accompanied by the steady, hypnotic beat of drums. Following them, elite fighters staged mock duels, the sharp ring of clashing steel echoing through the grand hall as they demonstrated the martial discipline of our sects. It was a proud display, but as the night grew long, I noticed Ruth was becoming restless, and she was ready to return to her quarters. To end the ceremony, I walked towards the edge of the platform to address my people, my brother and sisters, people of Shalu Sint. For almost 500 we struggled and fought for survival. No matter what paths have crossed, we have managed to overcome them all. Our children have continued to grow strong. Our warriors remain unstoppable. We are walking into a new era of history. We must decide on a path that will guarantee the survival of the Shalut Sint for 500 more. 6 cycles ago, there was an attempt to cut our bloodline from history. I stand today in front of you to say our bloodline remains intact. With the echo of those final words, the The grand hall erupted, the crowd roaring with fierce, unstoppable pride. I turned to walk towards Ruth and kneeled before her. I reached for my son and asked her for his name. She smiled warmly and whispered his name in my ear. As I walked back to the edge of the stage, I looked down at my son and kissed him. With both hands, I held him up towards my people and yelled his name with pride, Cicero. The crowd roared and began to chant his name. Cicero, Cicero, Cicero. I gestured towards Ruth to take my hand, and we began to walk down the stairs towards the grand doors. Halfway down the stairs, I looked back. I saw the High Council members bowing in honor to the birth of my son. I dreamed a dream of dreams. Epilogue. It had been a full lunar cycle since the grand naming ceremony honoring Cicero's birth in Sint. The people had rejoiced, finding solace in the promise that their bloodline would continue. Yet there is always a snake coiled in the brush, waiting in the shadows. As Warlord Van and Ruth descended from the platform and made their way out of the great hall, escorted by a deafening chorus of praise from the masses and the rare, smiling approval of the High Council, one figure stood completely frozen. Among the sea of cheering faces, he offered no songs of worship. His features were hardened in absolute fury. It was the second-in-command, Togoldor Zaya. With the death of his son, Erd-Din, Togoldor claimed he had no knowledge of the attack or the boy's traitorous plans. Even if that vow holds true, a son is still a son. Blood calls out for blood, and such a loss will not be easily forgiven. Van believes that keeping Togoldor close is the wisest move to contain him, but it is the schemes Togoldor whispers in the dark that keep me awake. I couldn't care less about these ancient sects and their desperate, bloody scrambles to maintain power, but I do care about Ruth, and I care for the safety of that child. It had been nearly a full Ore cycle since I last laid eyes on Trogon. If there was anyone else in this desolate galaxy who cared about Ruth's survival as fiercely as I did, I knew it was him. Tracking him wasn't easy, but all signs pointed at him slipping back into the shadows of Draxic. Desperate for an edge, I sent an encrypted broadcast into the underworld, requesting the counsel of an assassin intimately familiar with the lethal factions of Clison. When a coded response blinked across my datapad with these exact coordinates, I moved immediately. The meeting place that was chosen was a masterclass in evasion, a subterranean outpost buried deep within the jagged trenches of the sector. As I stepped deeper into the shadowy recess of the cavern, my hand hovered close to my blade, which was shielded under my blue cloak. I could only hope that the figure waiting for me in the dark was the ally I so desperately needed. The air here was heavy, tasting of sulfur and recycled oxygen, humming with the low, distant vibration of underground thermal vents. Dim, amber emergency strips provided the only light, casting long, fractured shadows against the raw volcanic stone walls. It was a place where secrets were currency and onlookers were rare. "Remove your hand from your blade, old man," a stern voice rasped from the shadows. I froze, then slowly dropped my hand back to my side, my pupils dilating, as I tried to force my eyes to adjust to the oppressive darkness. "I am the one who requested this meeting," I said, keeping my voice steady, aiming for reassurance rather than weakness. "Step out of the shadows and show yourself," I commanded. The last words had barely left my lips when a figure dropped soundlessly from the ceiling struts above, landing with feline grace directly in front of me. "I know exactly who you are, Bata," he murmured, dragging my name slowly across his lips like a threat. He reached up and pulled away his tactical mask, revealing his face. With a sharp snap of his fingers, a row of overhead floodlights flickered to life, bathing the subterranean chamber in harsh white light. My heart stalled. We were not alone. Standing in the perimeter shadows, weapons drawn and eyes locked onto me, were the old man and the boy that were escorted off Van's ship along with Trogon. The trap had been sprung, and I was standing right in the center of it. To my surprise, it seems that they might have been waiting for this opportunity themselves. "Drop your weapons," I demanded, keeping my voice level despite the adrenaline. "I am no threat to you, but I do need your help." "Why exactly would we help you?" the older man spat, his blaster leveled dead at my chest, his grip rock solid. "It's not for me," I whispered, letting the weight of my words hang in the tense air. "Ruth needs your help. She needs all of our help." I kept my hands visible, calmly trying to read the volatile temperament of the room. "Is she all right?" the pale-faced boy cried out, taking a frantic step toward me, his anxiety cutting through his defensive posture. "She is safe for now," I said reassuringly, trying to ground him. However, the situation has changed. Ruth has given birth to Van's child, a male heir. We will never be able to extract her from Van's grasp without a war. He would rip us apart, limb from limb, if he caught us trying. But even Van's wrath is a secondary concern now. The birth of this child has placed Ruth in far more danger than she ever was before. "How could she be in more danger with a warlord protecting her?" the older man countered, his brow furrowing. Before the answer could leave my lips, Trogon's voice rumbled from the dark corners of the room. "Because of his birthright," the warrior growled, stepping into the light. "Because of what is promised to him as the heir to Van. It is the exact same reason why Van slaughtered my people, the same reason why he murdered my mother, and the same reason I was forced to live as a refugee on a foreign world. It is because of power." Pure, unadulterated venom filled Trogon's eyes as he locked his gaze onto me. "And now you have the audacity to come here and ask for my help?" "Yes, I do," I fired back, refusing to back down from his intimidating frame, "because just like you once were, that child is innocent. I know I am not the only one in this room who is concerned about Ruth's safety. If you didn't care, Trogon, you would never have escorted her safely down to the prison cells on that ship when you had the chance to leave her to the wolves." The room plunged into silence. The only sound left was the low, mechanical hum of the ventilation units and the heavy, synchronized rhythm of our breathing. "What is it you expect us to do?" Trogon asked, his chest rising and falling beneath his armor. "I am the dead son of Lax Laumoon. I have no claim in this war." His words carried the bitter weight of truth, but I wasn't deterred. "You are entirely correct, Trogon," I replied, taking a slow step forward to bridge the distance between us. "That is why I did not come here to speak to the ghost of the Laumoons. I am here to speak to the son of Stor Beskitta, the heir Flocka Skjult Beskitta, the rightful leader of the Skjult sect." I watched him closely, praying that the weight of his hidden lineage would pierce through his stubborn pride. "You must return to your adoptive father's sect and reclaim what belongs to you," I urged, my voice vibrating with absolute certainty. "Build an army, become strong, become the ally I will desperately need when the shadow falls, because when the time comes to protect Ruth and her child, we will need every blade." Trogon looked at me sternly, the muscles in his jaw tight, before he violently threw down the tactical mask he was holding. It clattered loudly against the stone floor. Do you honestly think the shield alone is enough to survive a war of this scale, old man? He asked, with a bitter smirk cutting across his face. No, I do not, I replied, without missing a beat. My people, the Dolgun, have already vowed their blades to protect the child if necessary. Furthermore, I am certain the High Council and their elite Shuja forces will join the fray. I haven't discovered why just yet, but for some reason, their gaze is locked firmly onto that boy. The older gentleman stepped forward, breaking his rigid defensive posture. He walked up to Trogon and firmly placed a hand on his forearm, a grounding, comforting gesture of brotherhood. I know this isn't the way you wanted to step back into the line of fire, son, he said softly, his voice steady with grit. But we gave our oath to Ralph. The lady comes first. As those sacred words echoed in the damp cavern, Trogon shook his head in disbelief, yet a quiet, unbreakable agreement settled over his features. The fierce warrior bowed his head in agreement. The lady comes first, Trogon repeated, his voice dropping to a solemn, iron-clad vow. Suddenly, a realization struck me. I turned my gaze toward the corner of the room. You, over there, come stand next to me, I ordered the young man. He stepped out of the shadows, walking slowly toward me with a deep, questioning look stamped across his face. As he pulled up alongside me, my suspicion was confirmed. He wasn't much taller than I was. His frame, built for agility rather than brute strength. As the child grows, I will need someone I can trust implicitly to accompany him, I explained, addressing the others. I cannot protect Ruth and her son simultaneously. My focus will be divided. What exactly are you suggesting? The older man asked, his eyes narrowing defensively. I suggest this boy trains with my people to become a healer, I stated. Once his training is complete, he will serve as my second. That way, neither Ruth nor the child will ever be left unguarded. I looked down at the kid standing next to me. Beneath his nervous posture, a spark of genuine excitement lit up his eyes at the proposition. What is your name? I asked. My name is Jake, he answered with a nervous grin breaking across his face. I've got to admit, I never pictured myself becoming a doctor. Trogon let out a deep, booming laugh that echoed off the stone walls. The Dolgun are not simple healers, boy, the warrior rumbled with a smirk. They are deadly warriors disguised as healers. Jake's smile instantly melted into a worried frown. Before he could begin to second-guess the choice or let panic set in, I placed a reassuring hand near his shoulder. Do not worry, Jake. We rarely have to unleash those specific skills. They exist primarily as a deterrent, keeping enemies at bay. It sounds like a solid strategy, the older gentleman confirmed, nodding slowly. However, there is a logistical problem. Without Jake, I lose my interpreter. I won't always be at Trogon's side. I nodded slowly, acknowledging the older man's tactical dilemma. You make a fair point. Communication is a vulnerability we cannot afford when the sparks fly. I walked over to my gear pack, resting on the stone table, unlatching the metallic casing. Inside, nestled in a velvet-lined chamber, gleamed a small silver bioinjector, filled with a microscopic network of glowing blue threads. Which is why we solve the problem now. I am going to install a translator lattice directly into your neural pathway. It is the exact same procedure I performed on Ruth back on my ship when she first arrived. It will bridge the language barrier. He eyed the glowing injector with a skepticism, his shoulders tense slightly. Is it going to hurt? He asked shyly. Yes, but only for a moment, I replied smoothly, priming the device with a soft, mechanical hiss. A sharp pinch at the base of the skull, A brief flash of heat, and then the galaxy will speak your tongue. Stand still. Jake watched wide-eyed, leaning forward with newfound medical curiosity, while Trogon simply crossed his arms, a faint, amused grunt escaping his chest as he prepared to watch the old veteran take his first step into a wider universe. Once the procedure was completed, I learned that the older gentleman was called Robert. Trogon and I moved to the side to complete our strategy. We mapped out his return to the sect, calculating the political landmines he would have to navigate to reclaim his adoptive father's mantle. We both knew the reality of the situation. The moment we stepped out of this cave, our communication would be severely limited. Total radio silence was the only way to keep Togoldor Zaya from tracking our network. I stood by patiently as Jake said his farewell to his comrades. It was a sobering, bittersweet moment to see. Watching the boy cling to his familiar world reminded me entirely of the day I left my own home to begin my arduous training. Once Trogon and Robert boarded their vessel, the engines let out a low, muffled roar, lifting off and vanishing into the atmospheric haze. Jake stood there, utterly alone, staring at the empty landing pad. After a long moment, he turned, faced me, and began walking toward me with slow, deliberate steps. "Are you ready for your next adventure?" I asked him, offering a faint, amusing smile to break the heavy silence. "Ready as I'll ever be," he replied, his voice carrying a newfound weight. Once we entered my ship, I logged the encrypted coordinates into our navigation system, preparing our destination for the northern quadrant, the harsh, unyielding land of the Dolgoon.